fraction word problem homework. So a chocolate bar that weighs 9 out of 16 of a pound is cut into 6 equal parts. How much do 3 parts weigh? Okay, so if we were to cut it into 6 equal parts, we know that there are 2 ways we could do this. We could divide this by 6, and then to get the 3 parts, we'd multiply it by 3. Or since we know that half of 6 is 3, then we could just take this and go ahead and just take half of that, and that would still give us the same answer. So we made it a 1-step when it could be a 2-step. So either way that works for you. So I said 9 over 16 divided by 2 over 1. So we got to keep our first number the same, change division to multiplication, and then flip the 1 over the 2, and you should get 9 over 32 as your answer. Now it would be interesting to see if you got the same answer doing your division and multiplication the other way instead of this way. So you could try the other way just to check your answer. All right, number 2. And remember, I had told you to go through the problems, underline some important information, and write whether it's adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing, or a combination of the two. So for number 2, a community swimming center advertised lifeguard position for the summer. The manager of the center hired 1/4 of the 112 applicants that he interviewed. How many lifeguards did the manager hire? Okay, so we want to know what 1/4 of 112 is. So basically, there's 2 ways you could do this. We could say 1/4 times 112, or we could divide 112 by 4. Okay, so I chose to multiply 1/4 times 112 over 1, which I would get 112 over 4. Okay, and 4 goes into 112. 28 times. So that means that the manager hired 28 lifeguards. Okay, number 3 actually. How many times must a jogger run around a circular 1/4 mile track in order to have run 3.5 miles? Okay, so we want to see how many times 1/4 goes into 3.5 miles. So we take our total, 3.5, and we're going to divide it by 1/4 to see how many laps we're going to have to run. So to change this to an improper fraction, 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. So we've got 7 over 2. So keep, change, flip. So we've got 7 times 4 is 28. 28 divided by 2. So we have 14 is our answer. Okay. Number 4. Lake Johnston's path is 3 5/8 miles long. Mark and Mary walked the entire path 4.5 times. What was the exact distance that they walked? Well, we know that we could say 3 5/8. We could add it 4 times and then add another half of it. But to make it even easier, all we have to do is multiply how long the path is by how many times they walked it. Okay, and this time we're going to have to change 2 things to improper fractions. So 3 times 8 is 24. 24 plus 5 is 29, so we have 29 over 8. Okay, 2 times 4 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9, so we've got 9 over 2. If we multiply, 29 times 9 is 261, and then we know 8 times 2 is 16. Okay, so 261 divided by 16, we end up getting, you might have to get some scrap paper to do this long division. You'd have 16 as your whole number. You'd have 5 left over out of 16. So 16 5/16. Okay. Number 5. Mr. Terry Turkey had 5.5 pies left over from Thanksgiving. He equally divided them up between himself and 5 of his cousins. How much pie will each person receive? Well, we need to take the total and divide it by the total number of people. The total pie divided by the total number of people. Well, we can't forget he included himself. So it's actually going to be 5½ divided by 6, not 5½ divided by 1. Okay, so if we change this to an improper, we have 11 over 2. Keep that the same. Remember, we had to put the 6 over a 1 to make it a fraction. So we're going to keep, change, flip this to 1/6. And we've got 11 over 12. And we don't need to simplify because 11 over 12 is already simplified as much as it can be. Okay. Number 6. Johnny combined 7/8 cups of pancake mix and 3/4 of cup of water to make pancake batter. If he uses 1/4 of a cup of a batter to make each pancake, how many pancakes can Johnny make from his batter? Well, first we need to find out how many cups the total batter is. Okay, then we can see how many 1/4 are in there. So first we need to add the 7/8 and the 3/4. And then we can figure out how many 1/4 are in there. So to add this, you could go ahead and try make this a common denominator because we know that 8 is a factor, or 4 is a factor of 8. So we can multiply this by 2 on the top and the bottom to make this 7/8 plus 6 over 8. Which would give us 13 over 8, okay? So that is how much batter we have. I'm going to leave it improper because we still have one more step to do. So I'm going to bring this down here so that we have some extra room. So we're still working on number 6. We got the first part was 13 over 8. Now we need to see how many fourths can fit into that 13 over 8. So we've got to divide by 1/4. So we've got 13 over 8 times 4 over 1, and so 13 times 4 is 52, and then 52 divided by 8 is 6½ So our answer would be 6½ okay. So how many pancakes can Johnny make from his batter? Our answer ends up being 6½. Okay? So 6½ pancakes. All right, so let's move on to number 7. The average person in the United States chews 1 9/16 pounds of gum each year. The average person in Japan chews 7/8 a pound. How much more gum do the Americans chew? So that means we need to subtract. So we're going to say 1 9/16 subtract 7/8. Okay, so we need to change this to something that we can use. Well, if I didn't want to do it this way, remember I can use my butterfly method. So what I'm going to do, since they are smaller numbers, is I'm going to change this 1 9/16 to an improper fraction. So 16 times 1 is 16 plus 9 is 25 over 16. Okay. Subtract 7 over 8. Okay. So I'm going to cross multiply both sides. And this does end up being a little bit of work, so I'm going to show you how to do the butterfly method and the common factor method. Okay, because 25 times 8, especially not being able to use a calculator, is 200. Okay, 16 times 7 is 112. Okay, and then 16 times 8 is 128. And it does say subtraction, so you need to make sure you subtract the top two. So when you get your answer, we've got 200 subtract 112 is 88, and 128 is the denominator. So then we need to simplify that. So I see that, well, I know 8 can go into 88, but can 8 go into 128? And it can. It can go in 16 times. So 8 divided by 8 is 11, okay? And then 128 divided by 8 is 16. So the answer is 11 over 16. But I want to show you how you could get that with your common denominator way. Okay, so once we find that this is, make it a common denominator, we've got 14 over 16. Well, 9 can't subtract 14, so we've got to borrow this 1 and make it a 0, and this becomes 9 over 16 plus 16 over 16. Remember, you always use the denominator to make it a whole 1. So 9 plus 16 is 25 over 16. So now this numerator is bigger than the denominator. So 25 subtract 14 gives us 11 over 16 as well. So whichever method you prefer is fine with me. Okay? Number 8. Raven watched TV for 3.5 hours after school. The next day she watched another 4 4/5 hours of TV. The day after that, Raven watched 2 1/3 hours of TV. How many hours of TV did Raven watch during the 3 days? Okay, so this one might get a little long, so I'm going to grab me a scrap sheet of paper. Okay, and I'm going to first add 3 1/2 plus 4 4/5. Well, again, I need a common denominator. So I know that 10 is a common denominator for both of these. So if I multiply by 2 on the bottom down here, I have to multiply by on the top. Same thing up here. If I multiply by 5 to get 10 up here, I have to multiply by 5 over here. Okay, so now I'm going to combine. 5 plus 8 is 13 out of 10. 3 plus 4 is 7. Well, this is improper, so I need to fix this before I can move on to adding the last number. So we know that 10 goes into 13 one time, so we're going to make that 1 plus that 7 is an 8, and then we had 3 left over. This is 3 out of 10. Okay, and if you didn't like to do it the way I just did it, what you could do is forget about the 7 for a second and say, well, this would be 1 3/10. So I need to add that 7 to the 1 3/10 to get 8 3/10. Okay, and the last number I need to add is she watched 2 1/3 hours the last day. Okay, so common denominator again, it's going to have to be 30 because 10 and 3 can both go into 30. So 3 times 10, 1 times 10, then 10 times 3 is 9. Okay, so we got 9 plus 10 is 19 out of 30, and 8 plus 2 is 10. So she watched TV for 10 and 19 out of 30 hours. Alright, so this is the end of the homework. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns.